evening, folks, and welcome back to the Shining Light Podcast and Part 4 of the Goshen School Board 2022 election story. If you tuned into Part 3, you know that the 2022 Goshen School Board election was far from ordinary, and at the center of an attempt to shut down the conservatives was a mailer produced by school board members and candidates Alan Kaufman, Jose Elizalde, Roger Nafziger, Mario Garber, and Andrea Johnson. Today, we're diving into the real legal issue, the activities used to fund the mailer. It took persistent effort to uncover what truly happened, but Kaufman ultimately became a key source of information, and some major issues quickly came to light. Glick took an offensive approach, using the mailer's errors as an opportunity to show who he really was, with a dedicated set of pages on his website addressing the inaccuracies and a letter to the editor of the Goshen News presenting a rebuttal and directing readers to his site for the complete story. As a result, the mailer story drove hundreds of people to his site in the critical week leading up to the election. The letter to the editor was published on October 31st, just 2 days after voters received the mailer. News had already spread that Glick was calling for the board members to apologize for the clearly incorrect content, prompting Kaufman to address the issue immediately. On October 30th, he reached out to the other board members and Goshen teacher Marilyn Torres, writing, "I don't think the response to the mailing can be ignored," especially where Ryan Glick demands a public apology for the error made identifying him as Linda Hartman's son-in-law. They immediately began working on a public statement to contain the fallout, even requesting the input of Goshen City Council member Julia King. But before it could be released, Glick's rebuttal printed in the Goshen News. Kaufman, in turn, discussed this with the other board members and wrote his own response, which was printed in the Goshen News on November 2nd. He wrote, "This is in response to the letter in Monday's Goshen News from Ryan Glick alluding to false and misleading information about his campaign in a recent mailing to Goshen Community Schools voters. I received the mailing and carefully reviewed the message along with Ryan's letter. I am currently on the Goshen School Board representing District 4 and not due for re-election until 2024. Other than the unfortunate error saying that he and fellow Purple for Parent endorsed candidate Linda Hartman are related, I found nothing in the flyer that is false or misleading." On Ryan's website, he asks for a public apology from the 4 candidates on the flyer. "If I were one of them, other than the error saying Ryan is related to Linda, I would feel there is nothing more to regret saying." This third-party view of the mailer was intended to mislead his challengers as to what his involvement really was. He stressed that he received the mailer and examined it as if he had never seen it before, and said, "If I were one of them," as if they were solely at fault for the text, but this was immediately called into question. Glick again went on the offensive, asking, "Alan Kaufman, you say you received the mailing as if you had never read it before. Is that the truth? Who came up with the words chosen? Who paid for it? 3 sitting board members and the mother of a 4th were on that mailer. You are working with Jose to get him re-elected. So that's 5 board members out of 7 at least indirectly connected to that mailer. I can't imagine you didn't have any knowledge of that before it went out." In response, Kaufman was forced to admit his direct involvement as the author of the mailer, saying, "I'm not afraid to admit and not ashamed to say I wrote the original draft for the candidates to edit. Yes, I am working with Jose Elizalde as his campaign manager. I'm proud to do it, as I have no doubt that he is by far the better candidate for District 3. Kaufman's initial attempt to feign disinvolvement with the mailer rapidly disintegrated from this point, as he attempted to prove that he only wrote the mailer but that he did not pay for it. He wrote on November 5th, "I have explained to them on Facebook that there were many people who donated to a fund for a mailing. I have no idea who all contributed. The donations were combined and given to me to apportion to the candidates, who then used the donations to pay for the mailing. I don't have to identify the person who gathered the donations just so that person can be vilified by P4P candidates and supporters. It is properly disclosed on the mailer when the disclaimer says the mailing was paid for by the candidates. Yes, I apportioned the donations to the candidates on the mailing, and the candidates properly disclosed the large contribution forms required when over $1,000 is received between 5 and 25 days prior to an election." Again, forced to defend himself, Kaufman wrote on November 6, just 2 days before the election, "The money for a mailing was gathered by a private citizen from friends. It was given to me to help the candidates pay for a mailing. I suppose very technically one could say it became my money when given to me. But the candidates knew the money really came from many concerned people." Those large contribution forms uncovered a crucial fact. Kaufman was serious about hiding the true source of the funds. Retired teacher Sue Neeb, who had raised the money from friends and bundled it for Kaufman, as we reported in the last episode. It also revealed complete collusion between the board members and Kaufman to file false information, as each member was required to file that form and each one listed Kaufman as the sole donor to the mailer. Elizalde, Nafziger, and Garber all admitted to knowing that Kaufman was not the actual source of the funds prior to filing their forms. On November 8th, 2022, voters made their selections for the 4 seats up for election. Elizalde, Nafziger, and Garber won their races. But in the oddball twist, newcomer Ryan Glick defeated both Johnson and Angie McKee, taking the winning vote for District 1. Winning that vote was not the end of the story, though. There were still far too many legal issues to be content with that small victory, and he continued to fight for justice over the following months and even years. With the revelations from Kaufman, formal complaints were filed with the Elkhart County Election Board, alleging numerous election law violations, and formal police reports were made claiming criminal activity by the 4 members of the Goshen School Board. The election board held multiple hearings from November 2022 through April 2023. Ultimately, a list of charges was forwarded to the prosecutor, as reported in the Goshen News, including contributing over $500 toward a campaign with the untimely filing of a CFA 11 form, failing to report a contribution, collecting money as a campaign manager and not assigning it to the treasurer, accepting funds from a person knowing they were from another, falsely claiming money to be his own, failing to record donations, holding multiple positions as both campaign manager and treasurer at the same time, and receiving funds for campaigns that did not have him recorded as the treasurer, among others. Now, under Indiana law, most of these were misdemeanors. However, intentionally filing a fraudulent form is a level 6 felony. These forms placed all 4 board members in legal jeopardy, and some of their cases are still playing out today. Since we are out of time, we will delve into those details in episode 5 as we examine some of the specific legal violations uncovered by the election board and explore additional legal questions that arose outside of the primary investigation. Come back next time for more details on this infamous 2022 Goshen School Board election. Once again, have a good evening, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Shining Light Podcast.